El had watched civilizations die for 4,000 years. He had seen empires fall and species vanish from the stars. As an archivist of the chroniclers, his job was simple. He watched, he recorded, he never interfered. Today, he would watch humanity die. The observation vessel Eternal Witness hung at the edge of the system, far enough to be safe, close enough to record everything. El's many eyes studied the tactical display before him. 900 scourge vessels filled the screen like a swarm of hungry insects. Against them stood 14 human ships. 14 ships, El almost felt pity. The scourge had consumed 17 civilizations across 10,000 years. They were not soldiers or conquerors in the traditional sense. They were hunger given form. They absorbed other species into their hive mind, adding each victim's knowledge and biomass to their collective. No one had ever stopped them. The elder races of the Galactic Accord had learned long ago that the only way to survive the scourge was to stay out of their path. Humanity had not learned this lesson. Humanity was young and foolish. They had colonized a world in the system, and now the scourge had come for them. The Galactic Accord had refused to help. The cost was too great, they said. Humanity was too insignificant, they said. Better to let one young species die than risk the scourge's attention turning toward the core worlds. El had not argued, he never argued, he simply recorded. Let the archives show, he spoke into his recording device, that on this day the species known as humanity faced the scourge with 14 vessels against 900. Their colony holds 40 million souls. Their extinction is regrettable but inevitable. He watched the human fleet on his display. They had arranged themselves in a defensive formation around their colony world. Standard tactics, predictable tactics, the same tactics 100 other species had tried before they died. Then something strange happened. The human ships began to move, not backward, not into defensive positions. They moved forward. They accelerated toward the scourge armada. El leaned closer to his display. Surely this was a mistake. Surely they would correct their course. No species charged toward the scourge. It was suicide. The humans did not correct their course. They flew faster. El activated his communication interceptors, wanting to understand what was happening. Human voices filled his observation chamber. He expected panic. He expected desperate commanders giving hopeless orders. He expected the sounds of a species facing its end. Instead, he heard music. It was loud and aggressive, filled with driving rhythms and screaming instruments. El did not understand it. His species had no concept of music like this. It sounded like chaos. It sounded like war itself given voice. The humans were playing this music on open channels, broadcasting it for anyone to hear, including the scourge. The first human ship reached the scourge line. It was a small vessel, barely a frigate. It should have been destroyed in seconds by the massive scourge dreadnought before it. The human ship did not try to fight. It did not try to dodge. It flew directly into the dreadnought's hull and detonated its reactor. The explosion tore through the scourge vessel, killing it instantly. The human crew died with it. El's appendages trembled. He had never seen this. In 4,000 years of watching species die, he had never seen anyone choose destruction over retreat. Every other species fought to survive. They ran when hope was lost. They surrendered when running was impossible. Humans, it seemed, did not surrender. A second human ship broke from formation, racing toward another scourge dreadnought. This time, the scourge were ready. They concentrated their fire on the incoming vessel, tearing it apart before it could reach its target. But the humans had planned for this. While the scourge focused on the suicide ship, 3 other human vessels slipped through the gap in their fire and launched missiles at close range. 2 more scourge ships died. El began recording faster. His observations were no longer routine. He was witnessing something new. The battle continued for hours. The humans lost ship after ship, but they never stopped attacking. They never retreated. Every destroyed human vessel seemed to make the survivors fight harder. They adapted their tactics constantly, trying new approaches when old ones failed. They took risks that made no logical sense. And they kept playing that music. El noticed something else. The human communications were not just tactical. Between the orders and coordinates, he heard other things. Jokes, personal messages. One pilot, moments before her death, transmitted a birthday greeting to her daughter back on the colony. These humans knew they were going to die. They had accepted it, and they were still laughing, still caring about each other, still human. The scourge should have overwhelmed them in minutes. Instead, the battle stretched on. The humans had destroyed nearly 50 scourge vessels, an impossible number, a meaningless number against 900, but impossible nonetheless. El was so focused on the battle that he almost missed the flash on the edge of his display. A faster-than-light transit signature, then another, then a dozen more. He turned his sensors toward the source and felt his primary heart stop. Human ships, not 14 this time, hundreds. They emerged from transit in perfect formation, their weapons already charging. At their center flew a massive carrier, larger than anything El had seen humans build. Its name was painted on the hull in bold letters that somehow seemed aggressive. Unconquered. The new fleet did not slow down. They did not send greetings or demands. They simply opened fire. El finally understood. The 14 ships had not been humanity's defense force. They had been the first wave, the volunteers, the ones willing to die to hold the line until help arrived. He had thought he was watching humanity's extinction. He had been wrong. More transit signatures appeared. A second fleet. A third. Humans were coming from every direction, emerging from faster-than-light like predators surrounding their prey. The scourge formation began to shift, suddenly uncertain. They had never faced this before. They had never seen a species willing to sacrifice its own people just to buy time. They had never fought an enemy that ran toward death instead of away from it. El's voice was shaking as he updated his record. Let the archives show. Let the archives show that humanity did not send 14 ships because that was all they had. They sent 14 ships because those crews volunteered to die first. He paused, watching the human fleets close in around the Scourge Armada. I do not know what I am witnessing, he admitted, but I do not believe it is extinction. The music grew louder on the human channels. The same aggressive, defiant sounds as before, but now backed by the thunder of 1,000 weapons firing in unison. The scourge had come to consume humanity. Humanity had other plans. The battle had raged for 6 days, 6 days of fire and death and chaos. El had not slept. He had not eaten. He simply watched and recorded, his ancient mind struggling to process what his eyes were seeing. The scourge were losing. It should have been impossible. The scourge had never lost. In 10,000 years, they had consumed every species they had targeted. Their hive mind processed information faster than any individual could think. Their ships outnumbered humanity 3-1, even after the reinforcement fleets arrived. Their technology was proven across countless conquests. None of it mattered. El had started analyzing scourge communications 2 days into the battle. It was unusual for a chronicler to study a dying species so closely, but he could not help himself. He needed to understand what was happening. What he found in those communications disturbed him more than anything he had witnessed in 4,000 years. The scourge were afraid. Not of human weapons. The scourge had faced superior technology before, not of human numbers. The scourge had fought against worse odds and won. They were afraid of something else, something they had never encountered. Humans would not break. El accessed the Neuralink records from captured humans. The scourge kept detailed logs of their integration process. They absorbed other species by first breaking their will. They isolated prisoners, exposed them to horrors, showed them the hopelessness of resistance. Eventually, every species surrendered. Every species accepted integration into the hive mind as an escape from suffering. The humans did not surrender. El watched the recording of a human soldier in a scourge-holding cell. He had been captured 3 days ago. He should have been broken by now. He should have been begging for the integration process to end his pain. Instead, he was singing. It was a simple song, something about a home far away and a loved one waiting. The human's voice was rough and tired, but he kept singing. When Scourge drones entered his cell to begin the integration process, he looked at them and smiled. "You call this torture," he said. "I grew up with 3 older sisters. You have no idea what torture is." Then he laughed. He laughed until the drones sedated him. El did not understand. He searched his memory for any species that had behaved this way. He found none. Another recording. A human female, a Marine by her uniform. She had been captured during the initial assault. The Scourge had spent 4 days trying to break her will. They had failed. Now she faced the final stage of integration. Neural probes would connect her mind to the hive, absorbing her memories, her personality, her very self into the collective. It was the end of individual existence. Every species feared it. The Marine did not seem afraid. "You know what's funny?" she said to the Scourge drone preparing the probes. "I've been thinking about death my whole career, wondered how I'd go, never thought it would be like this." She paused, looking at the neural probes. "But you know what? I'm not going to let you have me. I'm not going to become part of your stupid hive mind. I'm going to die as myself." Before the drone could react, she bit down on something in her mouth. A hidden capsule. Her body convulsed once and then she was still. But she had not died immediately. In her final seconds, as her body was failing, she activated her communication implant and transmitted data. Fleet positions, patrol schedules, weakness in the Scourge formation. Information that the humans outside would use to kill more Scourge. She died smiling. The hive mind recorded its analysis of this event. El translated it carefully. Subject chose termination over integration. Subject used final moments to transmit tactical data to enemy forces. Subject displayed no signs of despair. Analysis: inconclusive. Recommend further study of species psychology. The Scourge did not understand what had happened. They had never seen a species choose death over absorption. They had never seen a prisoner use their last breath as a weapon. El found more recordings, dozens of them, hundreds, human after human refusing to break, human after human finding ways to resist even in captivity. Some scratched defiant messages into the walls of their cells. Some taught each other songs and stories. Some simply refused to show fear, no matter what was done to them. One recording made El stop and replay it 3 times. A human male, young and terrified, was brought before a Scourge integration unit. He was shaking. Tears ran down his face. He was clearly at his breaking point. The Scourge offered him peace. They showed him the collective, the end of individual suffering, the eternal unity of the hive mind. All he had to do was surrender. The human looked at them for a long moment. His shaking stopped. His tears dried. Something changed in his eyes. "No," he said. Just one word, but the way he said it carried the weight of mountains. "Why?" the hive mind asked. They genuinely wanted to understand. "You are suffering, we offer peace. Why do you refuse?" The human smiled. It was not a happy smile, it was something else, something sharper. "Because you want me to," he said, "and I would rather die than give you what you want." El finally understood. He had discovered a human concept that had no equivalent in any other language. Spite. Humans would endure unimaginable suffering simply to deny their enemy satisfaction. They would choose death over surrender not because they were brave, not because they were noble, but because surrender meant letting the enemy win. And humans would rather cease to exist than let their enemies win. The Scourge hive mind was fragmenting. El could see it in their communications. For 10,000 years, they had operated as a perfect collective, each drone connected to every other. Now there were gaps, hesitations. Individual drones were experiencing something the hive mind had never known. Doubt. If humans could not be broken, could not be absorbed, could not be made to surrender, then what was the point of consuming them? The Scourge fed on conquered species, but humanity was not being conquered. Humanity was fighting back with every captured soldier, every dying breath, every act of spite. The hive mind sent a priority message to all Scourge vessels. El intercepted it. Human prisoners are to be terminated immediately. Do not attempt integration. Repeat, do not attempt integration. The cost is too high. The Scourge had stopped trying to absorb humanity. They had given up. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Scourge had found a species they could not consume. Not because humans were stronger or smarter or more advanced, but because humans would rather die as themselves than live as part of something else. El added a new word to his species dictionary. Spite, a human emotion, the willingness to suffer in order to deny satisfaction to one's enemy. See also, stubbornness, defiance, the human spirit. He looked at the battle still raging outside his ship. The Scourge were dying by the hundreds now. Human fleets pressed them from every direction. He wondered if the Scourge understood yet. They had come to consume humanity. They had found something that could not be consumed. El did something he had never done before. He abandoned his observation post. For 4,000 years he had followed the rules of the chroniclers. He watched. He recorded. He never left until the event was finished. But the battle in the system was not just an event. It was a mystery, and El needed answers. He set his ship to automatic recording and retreated to the archives. The archives existed in a dimension between spaces, a realm where time moved differently and information was eternal. Every chronicler could access them. Every piece of galactic history was stored within their infinite halls. El searched for Earth, humanities. What he found made his heart freeze. Earth was not a paradise world. It was not a gentle cradle where life could grow safely. Earth was a death trap. The planet's tectonic plates shifted constantly, creating earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. The weather was violent and unpredictable. The star that Earth orbited bombarded the surface with dangerous radiation. The planet was covered with predators, parasites, and pathogens. Even the water was full of creatures that wanted to kill. El checked the data 3 times. Surely this was wrong. Surely no species could evolve on such a world. But humans had. He began reading their history, and his horror only grew. Humans had evolved as prey animals. They were not the strongest creatures on their planet. They were not the fastest. They had no natural weapons, no armor, no venom. By every logical measure, they should have gone extinct millions of years before they built their first fire. Instead, they became the dominant species on Earth. How El searched deeper. Humans had invented a hunting technique called persistence hunting. They could not outrun their prey, so they simply followed it. For hours, for days. They walked and walked and walked, never stopping, never resting until their prey collapsed from exhaustion. Then they killed it. El sat in silence for a long moment. He tried to imagine his own species doing this. He could not. No sane species would chase prey for days. The energy cost was too high. The risk was too great. It made no logical sense. But humans did it anyway, and they won. He continued reading. Human history was filled with war. They fought each other constantly, over territory, resources, ideas, religion, pride. The violence was staggering. In 1 century alone, they killed over 100 million of their own kind in conflicts. But even their wars followed strange rules. At some point, humans had decided that certain things were too terrible even for war. They created laws about how to kill each other. They agreed not to use certain weapons, not to harm certain people. Then they broke those rules anyway. Then they made new rules. El could not understand this. They created rules they knew they would break. They fought wars against each other while simultaneously trying to limit the damage. It was madness. He found information about something called nuclear weapons. Humans had discovered how to split atoms and release enormous energy. They had built weapons that could destroy entire cities in seconds. They had built enough of these weapons to end all life on their planet many times over. And then they had not used them. They kept the weapons. They pointed them at each other. They came close to using them several times, but they never did. For decades, they lived with the constant threat of total annihilation, and somehow they survived. So why? El found a concept called mutual assured destruction. Humans had realized that if anyone used nuclear weapons, everyone would die. So no one used them. They maintained peace through the promise of total war. Only humans, El thought, would consider threatening their own extinction as a form of diplomacy. He searched for more information and found the story of human space exploration. They had gone to their moon not because they needed resources from it, not because their survival depended on it. They had gone to the moon because another group of humans said they could not. It was called the space race. Two groups of humans had competed to reach the moon first. They had spent enormous resources, risked hundreds of lives, pushed their technology to its limits, all because neither side wanted to lose. El recognized the emotion. It was spite again, that same stubborn refusal to let an enemy win. Humans had reached the stars because of spite. He found an old transmission from humanity's early space age. It was a message sent into the void, hopping to contact other species. The words were simple: "We come in peace for all mankind." El compared this to transmissions he had intercepted from the current battle. Human commanders were sending messages to the Scourge fleet. "Scourge vessels, you have 30 seconds to withdraw or be destroyed. This message will not repeat." Both messages were sincere, El realized. Humans genuinely wanted peace. They genuinely wanted friendship with other species. But if they could not have peace, they would bring war. If they could not have friendship, they would bring destruction. There was no contradiction in the human mind. They could be kind and cruel, peaceful and violent, generous and merciless. They switched between these states as easily as breathing. This, El understood, was why the cosmos feared humanity. Other species were predictable. They had consistent values, consistent behaviors. You could understand them. You could anticipate them. Humans were chaos. They could be your greatest allies or your worst enemies. They could build hospitals and orphanages with one hand and weapons of mass destruction with the other. They could love their families and slaughter their enemies in the same breath. And they refused to accept any reality they did not like. Every other species El had studied accepted their limitations. If they could not win a fight, they fled. If they could not change their circumstances, they adapted. If the universe was unfair, they accepted it. Humans did not accept unfairness. They fought against it. They raged against it. They rebuilt the world rather than live in a world that did not match their ideals. El closed the archives and returned to his ship. The battle in the system was still raging. The Scourge were in full retreat now, their fleet shattered, their hive mind fracturing. He looked at the human vessels on his display. Those small, fragile ships full of those small, fragile creatures from their small, deadly world. They had no right to win this battle. They had no right to challenge a force that had consumed 17 civilizations. They had no right to stand against the inevitable. But rights, El was learning, meant nothing to humanity. They would take what they wanted. They would fight for what they believed. They would die before they surrendered. And somehow, against all logic, they would win. 12 days after the battle began, El did something that would have gotten him exiled from the chroniclers. He boarded a human ship. The carrier Unconquered was the largest vessel in the human fleet. It was also preparing for the final assault on the Scourge mothership. L had used his species' natural camouflage abilities to sneak aboard during a resupply operation. He hid in a storage compartment, his recording devices active, watching everything. He needed to understand humans from the inside. He needed to see how they thought, how they fought, how they won. What he found amazed him. Human military structure was nothing like other species. Among the Scourge, orders flowed from the hive mind to the drones. There was no discussion, no debate, no individual thought. Among the elder races L had studied, commanders gave orders and soldiers obeyed without question. Humans were different. L watched a tactical briefing in the Unconquered's command center. The admiral, a woman with cold eyes, stood before a holographic display of the Scourge mothership. "The mothership's main reactor is here," she said, pointing. "If we can punch through their defenses and hit this section, we can end this." A young officer raised his hand. "Admiral, our fighters will be cut to pieces before they get close. The Scourge defensive screen is too thick." L expected the admiral to silence him. Among other species, questioning a commander's plan was disrespectful at best, punishable by death at worst. The admiral nodded. "Good point, Lieutenant. What do you suggest?" The young officer blinked, clearly surprised to be asked. Then he stepped forward and began explaining an alternative approach. Other officers joined in. Within minutes, the briefing had become a debate, with soldiers of every rank offering ideas. L was amazed. They were building the plan together. Every person in the room was expected to think, to contribute, to improve the strategy. The admiral listened to everyone, from senior captains to junior pilots. "All right," she said finally. "We'll use Lieutenant's approach for the initial breach, Captain's formation for the fighter screen, and Sergeant Williams' idea for the reactor strike. Any objections?" No one objected, but L noticed something important. They were not obeying blindly. They had agreed because the plan made sense. If they had thought it was wrong, they would have said so. Humans, he realized, did not follow orders because they were told to. They followed orders because they understood and accepted them. Every soldier was a thinking being, capable of making decisions, capable of adapting when plans failed. The Scourge operated as one mind controlling millions of drones. Humanity operated as millions of minds working toward one goal. He was beginning to understand why the Scourge were losing. The assault began 3 hours later. L had found a position near the carrier's observation deck, where he could watch the battle unfold. It was chaos. Human fighters swarmed toward the Scourge mothership, dodging fire, weaving through debris, dying by the dozens. But for every fighter that fell, 2 more took its place. The humans never stopped coming. Elle watched a squadron leader take a direct hit to her fighter's engines. She was ordered to eject. Her escape pod was ready. All she had to do was pull the handle and she would survive. Instead, she accelerated toward a Scourge command node. "Tell my daughter I made it count," she transmitted to her squadron. Her fighter struck the command node and exploded. The blast tore a hole in the Scourge coordination network. Other pilots immediately exploited the gap, pouring fire through the opening she had created. She had traded her life for an advantage, not because she had to, because she chose to. Elle understood something then. The elder races of the galaxy feared death. They built their entire civilizations around avoiding risk, calculating odds, surviving. Humans were different. Humans did not fear death. They feared meaningless death. Give a human a cause worth dying for, give them people to protect, and they would march into oblivion with joy in their hearts. They did not want to die, but if their death had purpose, if it meant something, they would accept it without hesitation. The Scourge could not understand this. The hive mind valued every drone equally. Every loss was calculated, weighed against potential gains. No Scourge drone would ever sacrifice itself unless the mathematics demanded it. Humans did not calculate, they felt, they loved, they hated, and they would die for those feelings without ever doing the mathematics. The battle raged for hours. The Scourge defensive screen crumbled piece by piece. Human ships pushed forward, taking losses, never retreating. El watched a damaged human cruiser limp toward a Scourge battleship. The cruiser was dying, its hull torn open, its weapons failing. It should have retreated. It should have tried to save its remaining crew. Instead, it rammed the Scourge battleship at full speed. The explosion destroyed both vessels, but it also opened a path straight to the mothership's reactor section. Human bombers poured through the gap, their weapons armed, their pilots screaming battle cries over the communication channels. The first bomb struck the reactor, then the second, then a dozen more. The Scourge mothership began to collapse. Its massive form twisted and broke as internal explosions tore it apart. The hive mind screamed across all frequencies, a sound of pure terror and confusion. Then silence. The mothership died, and with it, the command structure of the entire Scourge fleet. Without the mothership's coordination, the remaining Scourge vessels fell into disarray. They had never operated independently before. They did not know how. Human ships surrounded them, picking them off one by one. The battle was over. Al listened to the human communication channels. He expected celebrations, cheering, joy. Instead, he heard something else. Silence, then names. Human commanders were reading the names of the dead. Every pilot who had fallen, every ship that had been lost, every soldier who had sacrificed themselves. The humans were not celebrating, they were mourning. They had won. They had done the impossible, and their first thought was for those who had not survived to see it. Then Al heard something that would stay with him forever. A single voice, young and tired, speaking over an open channel. "We made it count," she said. "Every single one of them, they made it count." The silence stretched for a long moment. Then slowly other voices joined in. The same words repeated like a prayer. They made it count. El did not fully understand what he was witnessing, but he knew it was important. This was how humans processed death. This was how they honored their fallen. Not with parades or statues, but with a simple promise that their sacrifice had meaning. And as he watched the Scourge fleet burn around him, El realized that this promise was not empty. Every human who died in this battle had bought something with their life: victory, survival for their colony, a future for their species. They had made it count. All of them. 2 cycles after the Battle of El stood before the grand convocation of the Galactic Accord. The chamber was vast, built to hold representatives from 1,000 species. Ancient races who had ruled the stars when humanity's ancestors were still climbing trees. Powerful civilizations who had survived wars, plagues, and cosmic disasters. The beings in the known galaxy. And they were all afraid. El could see it in the way they moved, the whispers they exchanged. News of the Scourge's defeat had spread across every world. A threat that had consumed 17 civilizations had been broken by a species that had discovered fire only a few thousand years ago. The galaxy wanted answers. "Archivist L," the speaker announced, his voice echoing through the chamber. "You have been summoned to explain your actions. You abandoned your observation post. You boarded an alien vessel without permission. You have filed the longest single-event report in chronicler history." El bowed his head. "I have, Speaker. I accept whatever punishment the chroniclers see fit." "We are not here to punish you," the speaker said. "We are here to understand. You have observed humanity more closely than any being in this chamber. Tell us what they are." El was silent for a long moment. How could he explain what he had witnessed? How could he describe a species that every rule he had learned in 4,000 years of observation? "They are contradictions," he said finally. They create art of stunning beauty and weapons of horrific destruction. They form bonds of love so deep that they will die for strangers, yet they wage wars over ideas. They are young, reckless, sentimental, and utterly, incomprehensibly stubborn. The chamber was silent. Every being was listening. I watched them charge into certain death against the scourge, El continued. Not because they thought they could win, because they refused to let their people die without a fight. I watched their prisoners laugh in the face of torture, choose death over surrender, use their final breaths as weapons against their captors. I watched them mourn their fallen and honor every sacrifice. He paused, gathering his thoughts. The scourge consumed 17 civilizations because those civilizations could be broken. Their will could be shattered. Their hope could be destroyed. Once a species lost hope, the scourge offered unity as an escape from suffering, and every species eventually accepted. El's voice grew stronger. Humanity cannot be broken, not because they are stronger than other species, not because they are smarter, but because they have something I have never seen in any other civilization. And what is that? The speaker asked. Spite, El said. The willingness to suffer, to die, to endure anything, simply to deny their enemy satisfaction. Humans will not surrender even when surrender is logical. They will not break even when breaking would end their pain. They will fight until their last breath, and with that breath, they will spit in their enemy's eye. Murmurs spread through the chamber. The elder races had never heard of such a thing. Their civilizations were built on logic, calculation, survival. The idea of suffering purely to deny an enemy victory was alien to them. You ask if they are a threat, El said. You ask the wrong question. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of beings who had ruled galaxies, who had lived for, who commanded fleets that could sterilize worlds. The question is not whether humanity is dangerous. The question is, what do they care about? Because whatever humanity loves, they will protect with every atom of their being, and whatever they hate, they will pursue to the ends of the universe. The speaker leaned forward. And what do they hate? El thought of the human Marines who had laughed in their cells, the pilots who had flown into certain death for their comrades, the soldiers who had bit through their own flesh rather than be absorbed, the voices reading the names of the fallen, promising that every death had meaning. Bullies, he said simply. They hate bullies. They hate anyone who uses power to hurt the weak. They hate anyone who forces others to submit. They hate unfairness itself. He let that sink in for a moment. The scourge were bullies. They preyed on species that could not fight back. They consumed civilizations because they could. Humanity looked at them and felt something no other species had felt in 10,000 years: anger. El's voice dropped to nearly a whisper, but every being in the chamber heard him. The cosmos does not fear humanity because they are powerful. The cosmos fears humanity because they believe, truly and genuinely believe, that the universe should be fair, and they will burn the stars themselves to make it so. The chamber was completely silent. They will never stop, El said. They will never give up. They will never surrender. Give them a cause worth fighting for, and they will fight until the last human is dead. And even then, I suspect they will find a way to keep fighting. He stepped back from the center of the chamber. That is what humanity is. That is why the scourge fled. That is why you should be afraid. He paused. And that is why, if you are wise, you will make them your friends rather than your enemies. The Grand Convocation debated for 3 days. In the end, they voted unanimously to offer humanity membership in the Galactic Accord. The ceremony took place 1 month later. El watched from the observation gallery as the human ambassador walked into the chamber. She was a veteran of the campaign, her uniform decorated with medals that meant nothing to the alien species around her, but meant everything to her own people. The speaker welcomed her with formal words about cooperation, shared goals, mutual respect. She listened politely. Ambassador, the speaker said finally. Before we complete the ceremony, I must ask, what does humanity want from the stars? What do you seek among us? The ambassador smiled. It was a warm smile, genuine and friendly. But Elle had learned enough about humans to see the steel underneath. Same thing we have always wanted, she said. To make friends, to explore, to build something beautiful. She paused and her smile changed slightly, just a little sharper, just a little more dangerous. And if anyone gets in the way of that, well. She did not finish the sentence. She did not need to. The chamber was silent. Every species in attendance understood exactly what she meant. El returned to his ship after the ceremony. He opened a new file in the archives, creating a fresh record for future chroniclers to study. He titled it, The Age of Humanity. He suspected it would be a long one, full of war and peace, destruction and creation, cruelty and kindness, full of contradictions that made no sense and actions that all logic, full of a species that looked at an unfair universe and said, "No, we will make it better." El had watched civilizations rise and fall for 4,000 years. He had seen empires born and species die. He thought he understood how the galaxy worked. Humanity had proven him wrong. And somehow, despite everything he had learned about their violence and their stubbornness and their terrifying potential for destruction, El found himself smiling. The universe was about to become much more interesting. He began to write.